This Atari ST podcast.
I mean, it started out when we did the U.S. doublers. I was assembling all those myself, and we were baking them in our oven because we potted them in epoxy so people wouldn't copy it. And I remember baking them to cure the epoxy in my oven. My wife loved it.
This is an interview episode of Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Tom Harker was co-founder of ICD, a company that created many popular add-ons for the Atari 8-bit computers, including the PR Connection, US Doubler, and SpartaDOS. Later, they created several upgrades for the Atari ST and Amiga computers and the CatBox networking hardware for the Atari Jaguar. According to a 1987 article in Antic magazine, Tom Harker started ICD in his basement in Rockford, Illinois, with Mike Gustafson, who then lived in Minneapolis. The company was incorporated in 1984, with Harker as president and Gustafson as vice president in charge of development. This interview took place on January 19th, 2016. Let's start at the beginning. Tell me about the start of ICD. What happened? How did you guys create the company, and why?
I bought an Atari 8-bit computer. I was investigating computers, learning about computers. I'd studied electronics, junior college, and was looking for anything I could do to get into computers. It's back when the PET computer was out, and Apple had just talked about, their first board computer, and all these single board computers were around. And Atari was the first one you could buy, or at least that I could afford, that had a keyboard, although it was a membrane keyboard, the one I could afford, and actually had some RAM in it, and had a possibility for saving on the cassette player, saving data and retrieving it. So bought one, just wanted to do anything I could for it, got excited about it, got my first disk drive, taught myself programming, learned, got real excited about it, saw its weaknesses. Atari really had weaknesses in using that SIO serial port for data transfer and the way they had locked up their disk drive system. So I wrote a disk copy program. That was the first product I did by myself. I sold it. It was called the Mighty Byte Disk Copier. I sold it through ads in Antic magazine and raised about $10,000 selling it. And in the meantime, realized its limitations and that you really need something that got into hardware. And I had heard about a guy up in Minnesota who had designed something called the Archiver chip. I heard it through a traveling salesman friend of mine. And so I contacted him. I called the computer store that I heard that was going to sell it. And I contacted him. That was Mike Gustafson. And the guy was a boy genius. He had written basically a disassembled Atari's disk drive operating system, had figured out how everything worked, and had rewritten it so disk could be copied and written on a sector-by-sector basis. And pretty much nothing could be hidden from it. It's the way computers should have been originally, writing right to the disk drive rather than through a funky operating system. So anyway, I had met with Mike several times. I told him I was really interested in his product. I became a distributor for it. There were two other distributors. I believe there's at least one other distributor down in Alabama. And I sold a lot of that product, and I guess I was the largest distributor for him. We had talked a lot during this agreement on, where we should go with it. And he had a business partner himself up in Minnesota. And we met several times, and we decided to form a company and create a direction for computer development, specifically in Atari. And so we formed a corporation. We couldn't decide on a name. We kept picking these strange names, and none of the three of us could agree on it. So finally, we just came up with ICD because we thought initial companies were really cool, like IBM, and it stood for I Can't Decide. That was kind of the local joke. So that was the founding of ICD. It was in 1984. It was Mike, myself, and another gentleman named Phil Seifert. We had agreements, we had partnership agreements, and the way things had to work. Within the first year, Phil wasn't working out, and so Mike and I dismissed him and took over, and Mike and I became equal partners in the corporation. That was the founding of ICD. Would you like me to continue, or do you have more questions?
Please just tell the story, and I'll jump in with questions later.
Okay. So then Mike, who at the time was 19 years old, had written this great product called the Archiver chip, and we decided, and the competition for it was Happy Computer. I don't remember the exact name of the product. It was kind of a cool product that had a bunch of RAM on it, designed from someone out on the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided we kind of lost interest in the copy products. At the time, they seemed like the wrong way to go. But Mike had done some development on a product called Archiver 2, and he kind of went in all kinds of crazy directions. He had started writing a disk operating system for Atari because he could. At the time, he was also doing things like 3D gaming. He was writing 3D framework for 3D games and just playing around with code. And the Archiver 2 product we kind of lost interest in, and so we decided to sell the rights of it to another company, and that happened. And I don't remember the name of the company. I don't remember if they even came out with a product, but the Archiver 2, and that was like the end of they got the chip rights as well, and that was like the end of our copy stuff.
Before we go on, tell me what you said. It was the wrong way to go. Do you just mean for encouraging piracy, or I mean, was that?
Yeah, encouraging piracy, and that wasn't really our intent. Our intent was we felt it was our right to copy games and have copies of things and archive things, and yeah, the piracy kind of got out of hand and crazy, and it just felt like the wrong business model.
Mm-hmm.
So when we shed that, we felt we had a fresh start. We just had this operating system that was partially done that he had written, and we knew that there wasn't really a market for the disk operating system. We did court Atari a bit on it, but they had their own feeble operating system that we felt, and it was really kind of a cross between MS-DOS and had some Linux influences in it too, or Unix at the time influences, and it eventually became what was called SpartaDOS. So, and Sparta came from Spartan, which was the Minnesota, settled by the Spartans, and Mike was from Minnesota. So we realized we couldn't really sell it because people didn't really buy disk operating systems for inexpensive computers. They kind of expected to be bundled with it, and Atari wasn't interested in buying it. So then we started brainstorming on what we could do to come up with products for the disk drive, and we realized we could do double density support for it and speed up support for it. Back in the day, the Atari disk drive didn't do double density, but the operating system naturally had the support for it built into it. So we figured out the hardware. We figured out we had to add RAM to it for a bigger buffer, and Mike disassembled and rewrote the disk chip for the 1050 disk drive. I think when Atari came out with a 1050, they had support for single density and 1.5 times density,
Mm-hmm.
and we added full double density. And then since we had the disk operating system, we figured out how to speed up disk transfers, which we called, what did we call that? I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it.
It's all right.
It was some kind of super speed up thing that we had that basically doubled or tripled the speed of read and writes on the operating system of the disk drive. So we felt that was kind of a cool product. We sold lots of them, and that was kind of our launch. And then we started looking at the other products.
US Doubler.
That's Atari had.
What you're thinking of?
Yeah, that was called the US Doubler.
Yeah.
With Ultra Speed. That's what we called it. Ultra Speed was our trade name for speeding up the I/O of it. And it was pretty successful. We sold lots of them. At the start, Atari had the chips socketed, so it was a real easy swap out. But then Atari started soldering the chips into the drives, so then we had to offer a service to people who didn't feel like unsoldering chips.
Mm-hmm.
So we handled a lot of that over the years of people sending in their drives. And, a lot of times people would damage your drives, and we'd have to do the repair on circuit boards to fix them, fix the broken traces and things like that. And so that was kind of a side business that we did. We had some tech people who worked in our company that did that. But we upgraded probably between 10 and 20,000 disk drives over the years.
Those are just the ones that you guys upgraded yourself, not even counting home upgrades?
No, not that we sold. I mean, that's about what the sales were of it. And eventually other products came out, I think, that did the same thing, but it's all kind of hazy because this was a long time ago. The next product we looked at was the serial and parallel connection Atari had. I don't remember the model number of Atari's product.
The 850 interface.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, 850 interface, and it was pretty big and pretty expensive and kind of kludgy, and we thought we could really do something like that. And Mike, basically, again, the guy was just a genius at assembling and disassembling and writing code. And he said, well, I can, disassemble their, reverse engineer it basically and disassemble their code and figure out exactly how the SIO works and redo it. So we did it. We found, and Mike had a lot of experience writing machine code and assembly code for 6502. So we found a single microcontroller that used the 6502. Rockwell made it. And we basically took that chip and built it around it. And we put serial ports and parallel port on it and made a tiny little box. We figured out how to make a injection mold for it. And basically, that's how the PR connection was born. And that was probably our most successful product. With the same chip, we created the printer connection, which was basically a printer interface that supported standard printers. And the cool thing about our product was you didn't need to load software from a disk or from a cassette to operate it. There were other products out there that had similar things. I think Microbits, which later became Supra, had something like that. But theirs, you had to load software code. You had to load the driver from disk or cassette in for the printer to work. With ours, the driver was actually inside the microcontroller, and it loaded automatically when the thing powered up. So
cool.
That was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
So over
did you
time,
say how many? That's exactly what I was going to ask. How many did you sell?
I think we sold about 25,000 of those.
Wow.
And that was just momentum. Then we just kept looking for more and more interesting things to make for Atari computers. And we kept making 8-bit products. We made RAM expansions. Someone had published in one of the magazines how to expand the RAM on one of the computers. And I looked at it and said, oh, that's really cool. We can do something like that, but let's make it a lot easier for people. So that's how Rambo was born. I think Rambo XL it was called, for the XL computer. I wish I was sitting in front of a computer right now. I could look up all our products and talk more about them, but I'm sitting in my car right now waiting outside a doctor's office, so I can't envision all of them, but maybe if you tell me what the products were.
Let's see. I don't know what order things came in. We've talked about the archiver chip, US Doubler, SpartaDOS, PR connection, Rambo XL, which was the memory upgrade.
That's about the order they all came out in. Yep.
And there was another memory upgrade that was like a megabyte or something crazy.
We had the multi-IO, the MIO board.
Yeah, talk to me about MIO. I don't know much about that one.
Yeah, the MIO was really a cool project. Mike, who, like I said, was pretty much a boy genius, figured out, he learned electronics really fast and figured out, and since he was so good in software and code as well, he figured out how the I/O port on the back of the Atari XL series worked. And I don't think anybody had ever done anything for that before. So we figured, here's a high-speed parallel interface that gives us access to the buses of the computer. So let's do something really cool for it. So yeah, the MIO was born. Basically, did it all in TTL chips to start with. We added RAM to it. We added serial I/O, parallel I/O, and we put in an expansion port to add RAM to it. It was just cool stuff. We planned an 80-column card for it. But basically, so what it was a box that plugged into the back of the XL computer. It had a ribbon cable. The connector plugged onto that expansion bus. Had a separate power supply, and it basically acted like a really high-speed hard drive. We used the RAM for RAM drive. Mm-hmm. Serial parallel ports. And,
that never actually came out?
Oh, it did come out. We shipped. We didn't ship a lot of them because it was very expensive. I don't remember what the costs were. I think they were $200 or $300 or something like that. And it was a time when memory prices were memory chips. There was a shortage of them, and prices skyrocketed. And so it became more expensive as time went on.
There was an article in Antic magazine that said you had the 80-column adapter was $100.
Yeah. Oh, actually, it had a hard drive interface as well. That was the other thing. So we also put a SCSI chip on it.
Wow.
And did a SCSI hard drive for it. So yeah, that was the cool way to add a hard drive to an 8-bit Atari computer. And so yeah, basically that was huge part. It was in the 8-bit world. That was the beginning of our exploration in the SCSI, how it worked, writing drivers for it, and that carried us on when we started doing ST development and Amiga development. And we kind of branched out because we had a lot of employees. We were building all the hardware ourselves here in the U.S., in Rockford, Illinois, where we founded the company. And it started out when we did the U.S. doublers. I was assembling all those myself, and we were baking them in our oven because we potted them in epoxy so people wouldn't copy it, and created that double density chip for it. And I remember putting them on cookie sheets and baking them to cure the epoxy in my oven. My wife loved it. But as we built the company, as we hired our first employee, we moved out of my house and rented space and went into an incubator type building. It was an old factory that had hit hard times, and they were renting out space to a lot of different companies. And it was kind of good for us because there was manufacturing available in there. So we hired them to build the metal on our hard drive case when we did the Atari ST case for hard drive.
Nice.
So it was beneficial for all. But getting back to the hard drive thing, Mike got a lot of experience in hard drive development. We grew the company. We decided we needed to branch outside of Atari because it was a pretty frail company and it wasn't the most popular computer out there. So we jumped into the Amiga market next, and we jumped into the Macintosh market at the same time. With our PR connection experience on the Atari, we decided to do a printer interface for the Macintosh. And it was never very successful, but it was basically printer-only interface plugged into Mac's proprietary port and had built-in drivers, just like the printer connection did for the Atari 8-bit. We did a hard drive interface for the Apple II. What else did we do? So we did a little bit of Apple II stuff, Apple II GS stuff. But the Mac market was a totally different mindset of people, and we didn't click with them very well, and there were already companies that were heavily embedded in them, and people bought them on name brand recognition, and that was it.
Why didn't you click with them? Can you expand on that a little bit?
It's Apple people, Apple mindset. Apple people we felt had blinders on them, and they just wanted something that plugged in and worked. And Apple was like the mothership. If it didn't come from Apple, they were skeptical. And there were a few companies that had grown up around Apple that they trusted, but they weren't very trustful of new companies, and they weren't hackers at all. The Atari community was more a bunch of hackers, and so was the Amiga community. So we did much better in there. We did fairly well in the Amiga community, but again, there were already some companies that were pretty well embedded in Amiga before we got there. I think Great Valley Products, GVP, was one of them. By that time, Microbits had gone bankrupt and reemerged as Supra, and they had also been in the Amiga market. And so they had a following as well. So it took us a while, but we made some good headway in the Amiga markets. But then came the big crash that basically killed things, and that was the IBM PC clone that came out from basically Taiwan Incorporated was making all the clones, and there wasn't room for development for American developers, it seemed, because prices were so cheap on all the parts, and drivers weren't really required. It was a different architecture. So that was kind of the failure of us. We kind of struggled to like where we're going to go next. And in our growth, we grew. We had about 50 employees. We had opened an office in Germany. Our office in Germany had 12 employees, and they were in charge of distributing our products in Germany, and in working with the distributors over there. And what happened that basically killed us over there was when the wall came down. I think it was '89. When the wall came down, Germany went through this huge change, high unemployment, which they hadn't seen. I mean, they had almost no unemployment before that, but they all of a sudden embraced all these East Germans, and all of a sudden they had 20% unemployment, and basically all the East Germans went on welfare, and the D-mark got real weak, and the dollar got real strong, and so our products all of a sudden cost 50% more in Germany than they cost before. And then all the engineers in Germany who were really good at copying things because they were, former Soviet Union members, and they were, making Apple clones and copying pretty much every computer thing in the West behind the Iron Curtain. All these engineers all of a sudden from East Germany were unemployed. And so basically they went and copied all of our products. So that basically killed us in Germany. We had a bunch of products for Atari ST, and they copied the boards, the sizes, they copied the PAL chips we were using, and they even copied the names pretty much. Like we had Atari ST hard drive interfaces. We originally called them Advantage Plus and Advantage this and Advantage that. Well, we got a copyright suit thrown on us because someone else on the West Coast was using the name Advantage for parts. So we pulled that back after a few months and renamed them AdSCSI. So our AdSCSI ST and our AdSCSI Micro and our AdSCSI ST Plus were our interfaces. Well, when the East Germans came out with theirs, all of a sudden they were called Advantage again. And they copied our boards, and all of a sudden this product line called Advantage was about half the price of ours available in Germany. And so all of a sudden in Germany it accounted for about 40 to 50% of our sales. All of a sudden we lost all that sales, and it almost put us into bankruptcy. We did bankrupt the German office and took a lot of losses over there. In the meantime, we were moving into development of products for the entertainment industry. We started working with a company developing a product it was a company called GuestServe. And GuestServe was developing products. If you go to a hotel room and you're bored and you want to look at TV or play video games in your room, something like that, that's what GuestServe wanted. And so they hired us to develop it for them. And so we put all of our engineering resources into that. And we had about 3 or 4 software guys and a hardware guy. Basically had a pretty strong core led by Mike. And we developed a really cool guest serve system. And we invested a whole bunch of money into building them. And they were funded by Philips, the guys who did TV sets and razors, things like that. Big Dutch company. And we thought, this is great. And as soon as we started our first production of them after about a year of development, they called us up and said they lost their funding from Philips. So that was the final straw that basically killed ICD. We started laying people off and pretty much had a lot of disagreements. It's like when your things go really bad for you in your relationship with marriage, and that's when all the bad things start to come out. None of the good things do. And it was basically the breakup of ICD. And Mike and I split up. Mike went back to Minnesota. And he took 5 of the engineers with him. They were going to start up another company. Doug Wheeler was one of them who went with him. And I'm not sure whatever happened to Doug. But he basically, we split up. I bought him out, and I basically handled all the debt and keeping us from going bankrupt, and dealt with it for years. And in that, I continued to work on development of products and sales of our existing stock. And like we had a product, what was it called? I can't think of the name of it. Basically, I went further with development of some products. And then since I had contacts with Atari, I got involved in Jaguar development. And I thought, this is cool. This makes sense. This is something Atari could do. And so I started looking at the Jaguar and what we could do for it. I partnered up with 2 guys. Basically, I formed a new company called Black Hat Design because I did hardware design in it. And that's where the CatBox came from. And I was also working on some game controllers and things like that, but they never came to market. So I put out the CatBox. I figured out how to do networking on the Jaguar, and unfortunately, Atari had some serious bugs in their chip that the Jaguar was based on, and networking was one of the huge problems. It could have been, the first game system to be on the internet, but because of this bug, it couldn't communicate on the internet, couldn't do TCP/IP properly and handshaking properly, and Atari was just getting ready to go gold on the chipset, and they wouldn't fix it, and so Atari was ship broken. So we did what networking we could, and we compensated with code and hardware, but it still could never connect to the internet, but it could do local networking. And I teamed up with Doug Engel and what's his name? Scott. And Scott was another genius. Could do game code and game engine design really well, and Scott was really good with graphics, 2D and 3D. And Stephanie, who's Scott's girlfriend, did music, and we created Battlesphere. And same thing happened there. As Battlesphere was coming out, we supported networking with it. I also got my friends who did Air Cars to do networking support in that. They were the first game that did networking, and that was where we did our proof of concept for the network. And I think we got up to 16 Air Cars games networked.
Wow.
We did demonstrations, and it wasn't a great game, but it was really fun to play. It was kind of a Mad Max type of thing. But anyway, Battlesphere was going to be the ultimate, and just as Battlesphere was finishing up, Atari kind of pulled the plug on the Jaguar. And I pulled the plug on Battlesphere myself because I couldn't afford it anymore. I was close to bankruptcy, and basically out of business. So I distanced myself from Scott and Stephanie and Doug and let them go on with Battlesphere on their own. And eventually they put it out on CD, and I went on starting my other businesses. So that was the end of ICD. My new company is ICD Group, Inc., which I started in 2005. And today I distribute networking gear. I got into the internet business, and I distribute networking gear from a company over in Eastern Europe that's very similar to ICD.
So networking gear for modern PCs, but your website still lists all the products, your Atari and Amiga. And
it's a tribute. It's basically a tribute. I put it up there and
Nice.
left it, and it's been a tribute to the products. Someday I'd like to polish it and put like the old catalogs and stuff up there, but it's a non-functional tribute website, really.
Oh. Well.
ICD website is just a placeholder. I use the ICD.com for email, and I use RockNock.com. RockNock.com is my distribution website, and RockRiver.net is my ISP website. So I started Rock River Internet, which was an ISP in mid-2000s, or no, it was the late 1990s, 1997, I think it was. That was when the game development stopped working, and started Rock River Internet, and basically became an ISP, did dial-up at the time and stuff like that, and got into wireless networking, got into hosting and servers, things like that. And as ISPs started dying out, started selling networking gear. Found this company in Eastern Europe, like I said. They're called MikroTik, and started selling them and distributing them because they weren't really well represented in this country, and that really took over as the main business then. And that's called RockNock.com, spelled ROC-NOC.com.
Nice.
I haven't kept too much very close to Mike at all. I've kind of seen through the internet what's happened to him. He did go work for Adaptec at one point. But it was really at the end of Adaptec being a functional company. He was their director of engineering, which makes sense because we used Adaptec chips, and he was very knowledgeable about their chipset. And I'm really not sure what he's doing today. There was a period when he also worked for an ISP, so he was a systems admin for an ISP, probably after his development deal fell apart in Minnesota. So we're all kind of in the connectivity internet business. One product that never came out that we were really excited about, we were doing modem development and networking products built on modems, but unfortunately that product never saw fruition.
What system was that from?
Would have been generic. That would have been PC-based product, just general networking. But, it kind of hurt us when we saw Super be so successful with their modem.
Right.
We were kind of friends with Alan Ackerman from Supra and his wife. And, we saw them, we were happy for them, but we saw them very successful with that. That was what we could have been.
Yeah. Can you think of any 8-bit products that you had considered but didn't come out with, or that you tried and didn't work out?
The 80 column board was always one of the holy grails, and we did actually get it going on the MIO, but I don't remember how many we sold, or very few sold. That's probably it. I mean, we would have loved to continue in the 8-bit world, but really the ST was where all the money was back in that day, and that was pushed really by our German side. We tried to sell the 8-bit products over in Germany, but the ST had really taken off over there, and so that's why we really focused on the ST after that. I did, as I was trying to recover from almost bankruptcy, I did sell all the rights to the 8-bit products off to a gentleman named Mike Holman, who tried to rebrand and make an attempt at doing cool things with the products, but that never came to fruition as far as I've heard. I think he also had problems and kind of disappeared. I'm not sure what happened, but since I sold all the rights to him, he owned all the rights to it, and that was gone.
Mm-hmm. We didn't talk about the R-Time 8 cartridge.
Oh yeah, I missed that. Yeah, that was just a cool thing. We were trying to figure out how to put a real-time clock, because before the internet, before we had time servers, it was real cool to have a timestamp on files and things like that, and support SpartaDOS, because we wanted time and date support. And it was kind of a cool little kludge. I mean, it was kludgy. Basically added a stack to the cartridge slot, but we figured out how to do cartridge stuff, and we had that cool pass-through cartridge that we developed. And we also did, we thought that would be a cool platform to add memory and storage to other things. And there were a couple products that actually used that. I think Keith
Ledbetter
did the DPS. Yeah, Keith Ledbetter.
Mm-hmm.
I think he actually put his 8-bit BBS in it. I don't remember what he called it, because it's been too long, but that was one of the things we supported with that. There's one or two other companies that did something with that cartridge that we supported and manufactured for them.
That was, yeah, I imagine that didn't sell quite as well. It was kind of a niche-y product.
Yeah, they were niche products. Yeah, the biggest mainstream product, the biggest success was the PR connection and the printer connection, which were kind of hand-in-hand things.
Yeah, I always found it amusing.
And of course, SpartaDOS, which everybody copied. I don't know how many people use it, but SpartaDOS. There were like 5 or 6 different operating systems for Atari 8-bit disk operating systems, but SpartaDOS was really only the radically different one. The others were just enhancements of Atari's operating system.
Right. You published some other software too. I was looking on Atari Mania. There's stuff that I'm not familiar with, but there's something called Technicolor Dream and Freaky Factory and Laserhawk and Rocket Repairman. Is software that you published that was not you? Okay.
It didn't come from ICD.
Huh. Atari Mania.
The only other things I didn't really cover was we bought OSS.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that.
Software.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were friends with them, and basically they were losing steam and momentum, and we gained steam and momentum, and we didn't want to see the products die, so we went out there and met with them, Bill Wilkinson and one of the software guys, and basically did a deal, and we basically bought the company and decided, to keep everything the same, reprint the manuals. They had pretty much run out of manuals. They had, we basically bought all their stock. And basically, we just bought it to keep it alive and keep it out there, keep, the operating system or the languages that they had, like Action, Basic Cartridge, and, the compilers and things that they had for the ST as well. So that was kind of a fun project. It was great meeting those guys. And I'm not sure what's happened to Bill Wilkinson. He went on to work for one of the big software companies.
Bill recently died. I interviewed him about a year ago, and he died just a couple months ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. He was a good guy.
Yeah.
Where did he work at the end?
I don't remember. I think at the end he was retired, and yeah. So I don't remember where he ended up before he was done.
Well, I don't think he was that old, so he died pretty young. It's a shame. It's just like the great rock stars who have died all of a sudden, like Glenn Frey. That was one that really touched me.
Yeah. That's what happens, unfortunately.
Yep.
So when you took over OSS in 1988, what was still selling at that point? What was their big seller? Still Action, or what was flying off the shelves?
nothing was really a big seller. Probably the ST product was the biggest seller at the time. But on the 8-bit side, it's really a shame because we really love the 8-bit product line, but the ST product line was where everything was going, and that's probably why they wanted to get out of it. The 8-bit product line pretty much died, except for all the diehard people, probably like yourselves and like me, who loved it. But everything was going 16-bit computer, and then eventually 32-bit computer, and now 64-bit and onward. Nobody wants to stand still, but so that's what happened.
Do you still have an Atari machine? Atari 8-bit machine?
I do not. Unfortunately, I do not. We lost our building, the old address on Rock Street. The building was sold. The company who ran the incubator there was going bankrupt, and they sold off the building at auction. And the landlord, basically, it was a huge complex that had its own power plant and everything. And the new owner lived in Florida and didn't want to spend time on it, so he basically let it go into disrepair. And we found out when there was a threat that gas and electric were going to be shut off, and we found out he wasn't paying the bills. So we basically formed a lawsuit to keep the building open as long as we could. But the tenants by themselves couldn't afford to keep it going and pay rent because we didn't own it, and pay all the back bills that were owed. It was something like $1 million in back bills that were owed for the utilities. So we kept it open long enough to flee from the building, and I had to leave a lot of stuff there. Unfortunately, a lot of product was left there. The building was basically put on mothballs, and we took our ISP. At the time we had started running our internet provider business out of there. We took everything we needed to run that out of there, and we had about 3 weeks notice, and we got everything set up. We had to find a new building, and move everything. And we had a lot of wireless customers already coming off a tower on the roof. So there was just a lot of scrambling, a lot of time to get things set up and keep operating, keep revenue coming. So we got that, and we left almost all of the equipment. I mean, we had run in that building for probably 8 or 9 years. It was a long time. And there was a lot of manufacturing stuff and stock and everything all got left there. And it was kind of interesting. I heard from people, emails that, they thought I was selling gear from old ICD stock, and I wasn't. It was people who were looting the product were selling it on eBay. And it ended up the city of Rockford finally bought the building from this deadbeat owner. They paid like 3 times what he paid for it, bought the building, and it was actually city of Rockford employees who were stealing the products and selling it on eBay. I tried to stop it, but never could get anywhere with it.
Wow. That is super unfortunate.
Yep. But, things like that happen. You just got to roll with it.
Yeah. All right, what haven't we talked about that we should have?
I don't know. Are you primarily 8-bit or?
The podcast is primarily 8-bit, but I'm certainly willing to talk about anything Atari if there's more stories or products.
It was sad what the Trammels did to Atari, but it's really sad that Atari never had good management. I mean, Nolan Bushnell, who was kind of a joke. I have no respect for him now. Warner, what they did to it, and then what Jack Trammell and I thought Jack Trammell was okay, but really his sons Leonard and Sam are the ones who kind of screwed with it. They didn't have the passion for it, and I'm not sure what happened to them. But they're smart guys, but they didn't have heart and they didn't have passion, and that's what you really need to have a strong company and have it go and have followers and keep it going. I mean, that's what happened. That's why Apple was so strong, because they had jobs. You need somebody like that who cares.
Yeah. How was your working relationship with Atari while ICD was big?
It was really cool. We went out there, met with them a lot. We flew out there. We knew everybody. It was a real cool development community too. We knew all the other developers. Dave Small was a good friend of mine. Bill Wilkinson, things like that. But Atari would show us things. We got one thing that really helped us. We got a copy of their operating system for source code for the XL, and that's what really helped make the XL strong, or the MIO strong product. I don't know if that ever got published, or it hadn't been published at the time, but we actually went out there. They printed it right off on their dot matrix printer and handed us the source code to it. Of course, we had to sign an NDA on it, but
Sure.
So that was cool. It would have been real cool if there was someone there central, again, with passion, but it was just, they had some good employees, and then they had Trammell's who were basically interested in making money. And Trammell's put everything behind the ST and took everything away from the 8-bit, so the 8-bit didn't matter when they came in. So unfortunately, 8-bit's an orphaned computer. I know Mike Holman was trying to do something. I don't remember the name of the company, but whoever bought the rights to the 6502, Mike Holman was trying to work with them to do SpartaDOS or disk operating system for him. But I don't think that ever came to anything. Hey, I've got to run. I appreciate the call.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, take care.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.